I've been sitting here for hours. The old clock on the wall keeps ticking, its steady rhythm only reminding me that time doesn't slow down, even when it feels like I'm sinking. This apartment, small and dim, feels like the only place in the world where I can still find some semblance of peace. The only place where I can shut out the noise of everything else. My name is Claire, and for as long as I can remember, I've always been the background character in my family's story. I've learned how to be invisible, how to exist without being seen, without ever asking for help, without needing anyone. In the grand narrative of my family, there's my older sister, Natalie, the shining star, the one who could do no wrong. And then there's me, the one who learned how to fade into the shadows, the one who people assume will always be fine. I've spent years trying to understand what it is about Natalie that makes everyone turn to her. She's the one who gets the attention, the praise, the validation. She married young, settled down into a picture-perfect life, had 2 kids, and even learned how to bake her own bread from scratch, just like it's some kind of life goal. It's almost like she was born with this magical ability to make everything look effortless, to make everyone believe that her life is perfect. I've watched her from the sidelines, admired her ability to shine, and felt the sharp sting of being overlooked in the process. But I wasn't like her. I wasn't interested in that kind of life. I wanted something different, something real, so I focused on myself, my career, my dreams. I bought my own apartment, tucked away in a quiet part of the city where no one could question why I wasn't married or why I didn't have kids. I didn't need to explain myself. I was fine on my own. I was independent, self-sufficient, and most importantly, I didn't need anyone. Or at least, I convinced myself that I didn't. The truth, though, is that it's hard to escape the weight of family expectations. My parents, mom and dad, never said it outright, but their questions always had this unspoken edge. When are you going to settle down, Claire? Natalie's kids are growing so fast. Don't you want to have your own? I'd nod, smile, and change the subject. I'd tell myself that I wasn't like Natalie. I didn't need that kind of life. But the reality was, no matter how many times I told myself that, I still felt like I was invisible. Like the world saw Natalie and never really saw me. But have you ever felt like Claire? Like your family, friends, or society have just grown so used to seeing you as the one who's always fine, the one who doesn't need help, the one who's supposed to have it all together. And in those moments, do you ever wonder, am I really seen for who I am? Claire, or maybe you at times, is the person who carries everything without ever getting a thank you, a look of understanding, or even a nod of appreciation. But have you ever had the courage to step forward and claim what you deserve for once? Have you ever been at the crossroads, forced to choose between living for yourself or meeting everyone else's expectations? Drop a comment below. I want to know, what's it like to make invisible sacrifices in your family? Do you ever feel like you're just the backup plan? And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next part of Claire's journey. Her story is, in so many ways, our story. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, I could somehow make them see me. If I showed them that I had my own life, my own successes, maybe they'd stop seeing me as the backup plan. Maybe, just maybe, I'd matter. But that was a lie I told myself for years. The truth is, I was always the one who everyone expected to hold it together. Natalie was the one who needed saving. She was the one who was allowed to have moments of weakness, of struggle, and I was the one who never got to show any cracks. I was the one who was supposed to be okay, always, And if I wasn't, no one noticed. No one asked. And I never complained. Not really. I kept my distance from my family, never letting them see the parts of me that hurt. I was always there, at family dinners, at birthdays, at holidays, but I never let anyone get too close. Not really. I watched as they praised Natalie, as they leaned on her for emotional support, for financial help, for everything. Meanwhile, I quietly supported everyone, expecting nothing in return. I thought if I kept helping, kept proving that I was the responsible one, they'd finally realize that I wasn't invisible, that I mattered. But that's not how it works, is it? It wasn't until the call came one night that I realized just how much my family took me for granted. That night, I thought maybe, just maybe, things were going to change. I was wrong. When my mom called, her voice unnervingly bright, I could sense something was off. She told me to come over, said they had good news. For a second, I thought maybe something had happened with Natalie, maybe a shift in her situation that made them finally see me. I drove across town, tired but curious, trying to push the doubt from my mind. But as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew. Natalie was sitting next to Mom, both of them looking uncomfortably anxious. And there it was, sitting on the coffee table, a thick folder, legal papers. I didn't even have to open it to know what it was. Mom smiled too brightly. "It's for Natalie's new house," she said. "A house. They bought it for her, with their savings. With the money they had always set aside for their retirement. A home in an upscale neighborhood. The mortgage on it was $350,000. A staggering amount that Natalie could never afford, not even with both her part-time jobs. But here it was, a house that she needed and one they expected me to pay for. "Take over the mortgage," my dad said casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Just like that, they assumed I would. Just like that, they expected me to carry the weight of it all. To step in where Natalie couldn't, without asking, without considering the life I had built for myself. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just being asked to help. I was being told to sacrifice everything I had worked for, to give up the future I had carefully planned, for someone else's mistakes. I should have said something. I should have stood up right then and there. But I didn't. I sat there in silence, staring at the folder in front of me, the papers inside it blurring together as if everything around me was fading. My parents, my sister, even the heavy weight of the mortgage on the table. It all felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold, not my own. It's not that I didn't want to help. I would have helped if they had asked. But this was different. This was a demand. A demand that I take on $350,000 of someone else's debt because they believed, in some twisted way, that it was my turn to sacrifice. "You've been saving for years, Claire," my dad repeated. His voice was calm, almost detached, as if the decision had already been made and there was no room for disagreement. I knew he wasn't asking me to take over the mortgage for Natalie's sake. He wasn't concerned about her future. It was all about keeping up appearances, about making sure that the family's reputation stayed intact, that everything looked perfect on the outside. And I was just the one who was expected to clean up the mess. I felt my pulse quicken, the blood rushing to my ears as I fought to keep my cool. My sister, Natalie, didn't even look at me. She sat there, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She knew what they were asking of me, but she wouldn't say anything. She wouldn't even acknowledge it. That's when it hit me. She didn't have to. Natalie had never had to fight for anything. She had always been the one to receive, to be given, to be saved. And me, I was just the reliable one, the one who didn't ask questions, the one who could carry the weight without ever making a sound. But I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to give up everything I had worked for, to sacrifice my future for a family that couldn't even see me. I wasn't some afterthought, a backup plan. The silence stretched between us like a physical thing. It was heavy, suffocating. I could hear my mom's breath hitching as she waited for me to respond. She was waiting for me to agree. She had already made up her mind, already assumed that I would take on this burden, just like I had always done for them. But this time, I wasn't sure I could do it. I wasn't sure I wanted to. "You've always been the responsible one, Claire," my mom said softly, as if that was supposed to make it better. "You know how much Natalie needs this." It wasn't the first time she'd said that to me. It wasn't the first time I'd heard that phrase thrown in my face like some kind of justification for everything they asked of me. It was always the same. "You're fine. You don't need anything. You can handle it. But what about me? What about my dreams, my goals, my plans? What about the years I had spent saving, working hard to build a life for myself? Was I just supposed to throw all of that away to fix someone else's mistakes?" I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room felt too small, like I was suffocating in my own skin. I needed space. I needed to think. "Claire?" My dad's voice followed me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I walked out of the house without another word. The cool night air hit me like a slap, and I breathed in deeply, trying to clear my head. But I couldn't stop thinking about what they'd just asked me to do. How could they just assume I would do it? How could they put me in this position without even thinking about what it would cost me? I was so tired. Tired of being the one everyone turned to when things went wrong. Tired of being the dependable one. As I stood there on the sidewalk, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me: anger, sadness, frustration. But most of all, I felt betrayed. They didn't see me. They didn't care. All they saw was a safety net, a cushion to soften their fall. And in that moment, I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that I was fine when my family had never really seen me. They had never bothered to understand what it took for me to get to where I was. I had spent years building a life that was mine, a life that was independent, self-sufficient. And now they wanted to take that away from me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to say no, how to draw the line without losing everything. But one thing was clear: I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for them. I walked away from my parents' house that night, the weight of their expectations still pressing down on me, but for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I just felt free. The next few days felt like a blur, a chaotic mix of silence and noise. The silence came from my family. After I walked out of their house that night, I didn't hear from them. Not a single call, not a text, nothing, and it ate at me. I'd spent so many years trying to make them see me, trying to be the one who was always there, always reliable. And now, here I was, sitting in the quiet of my own apartment, questioning everything. I kept telling myself I had done the right thing by walking away, that I had finally stood up for myself. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the calm before the storm. My family had always been the center of my world, and without them, it felt like something was missing. Like I was floating, disconnected from everything I had ever known. But there was another part of me, a part that had been buried under years of self-sacrifice, that was starting to grow louder. The part of me that wanted to break free from the chains of expectations. The part that wanted to live for me for the first time in my life, not for them. I spent the next few days working, trying to distract myself. I poured myself into my job, doing everything I could to avoid the storm that was brewing in my mind. But it didn't work. The guilt was still there, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I thought about Natalie, about the way she had just sat there, silent, as they handed me the burden. I thought about how she never had to make tough decisions, never had to fight for anything. I couldn't help but feel resentful. I had always been the one who gave, the one who sacrificed, and yet it felt like I was never truly seen. It was always about her, her problems, her needs, her perfect life that everyone seemed to worship. And I wasn't sure if I could keep playing this role anymore. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, when my phone buzzed. I knew who it was before I even looked. It was a text from Mom. The message was short and to the point. "Can we talk? It's about Natalie. Please, Claire, we need you." Just like that, everything came rushing back. The guilt, the pressure, the feeling of being the one who always had to come through. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. Part of me wanted to just delete it, to shut it out and pretend like I had made the right decision. But another part of me, the part I had tried so hard to bury, was screaming at me to respond, to fix things. I didn't reply immediately. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. But I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of something I couldn't escape. It was a Saturday afternoon when I found myself at a cafe, sitting alone with a latte, staring out the window at the people walking by. I had been avoiding my parents' calls, not wanting to deal with whatever they were going to say next. But now, the weight of it all felt heavier. I was tired of running. I opened my phone and scrolled through the messages I had ignored. There were messages from my mom, from Natalie, from everyone in the family. It felt like they had been bombarding me, hoping that I would cave, hoping that I would give in and do what they expected of me. But I couldn't. Not this time. The phone buzzed again, a call from my mom. I took a deep breath, the cold air of the cafe hitting my face like a shock. I answered the call, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. "Claire?" Mom's voice was soft, hesitant. "Are you there?" I said nothing for a long moment. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain what I had been feeling. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, it was all tangled up inside me. "Mom, I don't know what you want me to say," I finally said, my voice shaky. "I don't know what you want from me anymore." She sighed heavily, and I could feel the weight of her disappointment even through the phone. "I want you to help your sister, Claire. She's in trouble. You're the only one who can do this." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my ear as if it could block out the words. "And if I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What happens then? You'll be turning your back on your family, on us. You'll be walking away from everything we've given you." Her words stung. "We've always been there for you, Claire. We've always supported you. Don't you owe us this?" I felt my chest tighten, my breath catching in my throat. "I don't owe anyone anything," I whispered back. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, could feel the tension building between us. "Claire, please," she said, her voice breaking. "We need you." I felt the weight of her words settle on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. It was the same thing over and over. They always needed me. But when did I ever need them? I hung up the phone without saying another word. I sat there in the cafe, staring at my phone, the weight of the decision hanging in the air like a thick fog. The choice seemed so simple at first: help them or walk away. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no easy answer. There was no way to keep everyone happy. There was no way to fix everything without breaking a part of myself. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell them that I couldn't do it anymore, that I wasn't going to be the one to carry their burdens. But I also knew that saying no would change everything. It would change the way they saw me. It would change the way I saw myself. So I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and texted my mom back, "I'll think about it." It wasn't the answer they wanted. It wasn't the answer I wanted. But it was all I could give right now. The days that followed felt like a slow burn. My decision to respond with, "I'll think about it," hung in the air, a half answer, a coward's way out. But it felt like the only thing I could give. The only thing that kept me from completely breaking. I went back to work, back to the life I had built, my apartment, my routines, the small moments of peace I had fought so hard to create. I stayed busy, buried myself in tasks, avoided my phone, and tried to shut out the guilt gnawing at my insides. But no matter how much I tried, the guilt was there, always there, lurking in the background like a shadow I couldn't escape. Every time I picked up my phone, I was reminded of my family. There were messages from my mom, my dad, even Natalie, each one pleading for me to help. I ignored them all, hoping that if I didn't respond, the problem would just disappear. But it never did. Then one evening, after a long day at work, I found myself standing in front of my door, staring at my phone. The message was from Natalie this time, simple and blunt. "Claire, I need you. I can't do this alone. Please." I felt a surge of something, anger, frustration, maybe even. I stared at the words before hitting send, unsure if I had made the right choice. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about fixing her life. It was about me finally starting to live mine. Growing up, Natalie was always the one who was praised. She was the one who excelled at everything: school, friends, relationships. I was the one who was quietly there, never making waves, never asking for much. I learned to be the responsible one early on. I learned to take care of things without asking for anything in return. But what I never realized, until now, was that my role in the family was more than just being responsible. I was the one they leaned on when things got tough. I was the one who didn't complain, who didn't ask for help. I had built a life where I did everything on my own because that's what they had always expected of me. But the truth was, I was exhausted. I had spent so many years pretending that I was fine, pretending that I didn't need anything, pretending that I was okay with being invisible. And now, with every message, every phone call, I could feel the weight of all those years pressing down on me. I had never asked for anything from them, not once. But now, when I needed them to see me, to understand that I wasn't just some support system, some backup plan, they were nowhere to be found. I wasn't angry at Natalie anymore. I wasn't angry at my parents. I was angry at myself for letting things go on for so long. For letting them think that I could always carry the load, that I would always be the one who took care of everything. I didn't want to carry the load anymore. I didn't want to be the one who was always fine. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to live for myself. I put the phone down, took a deep breath, and walked over to the window. The city was quiet, bathed in the soft light of the street lamps. It was the first time in a long while that I felt like I was standing in my own life, not someone else's. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to make them happy, but I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't keep letting them decide what I should do with my life. I needed to break the cycle. I needed to take control. I went back to my phone and opened the message from my mom. I read it again, her words echoing in my mind. "We need you, Claire. Please help Natalie." I sat there, fingers hovering over the keyboard. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, I didn't have an answer for them. But then I typed. No, it was the first time I had said no to them. The first time I had refused to be the one who fixed everything, who cleaned up the mess. It wasn't easy. It felt like I was ripping apart a part of myself, a part I had always been, the part that was always the fixer. But it felt right. I sent the message and put my phone down, my heart racing in my chest. For the first time, I felt free, but also terrified. What would happen now? Would they understand? Would they ever forgive me? I didn't know. And right now, I didn't care. I didn't expect an immediate response. In fact, I was almost relieved when my phone stayed silent for the next few hours. I'd made my decision, and now it was out there, hanging in the air like a heavy fog. I knew I wouldn't hear from them right away. How could I? This wasn't just a rejection. This was me setting a boundary, one that had never existed before in my family. And boundaries, for them, were like walls. Walls that shouldn't have been there. But I had built one anyway. The quiet felt almost deafening at first. I didn't know if I wanted a call or if I just wanted the silence to swallow everything up. I tried to focus on work, tried to immerse myself in the tasks that I could control. But every now and then, my phone would buzz with a new notification, and my heart would race. It was only when my mom finally called the next morning that I knew things had changed for good. Her voice was different this time. There was no forced cheerfulness, no pretending, just raw emotion. "Claire, we need to talk." The words felt heavy, like they were carrying the weight of everything that had happened in the past few days. I could feel the tension through the phone, even though she wasn't saying much. The silence on her end was almost more telling than anything she could have said. "Mom," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "I already told you my answer." "I know," she replied softly, but her words held an edge now. "I know you said no, but Claire, this isn't just about money. It's about family. It's about your sister. You're the only one who can help her." I closed my eyes, leaning back against the wall, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on me. I could hear the unspoken plea in her voice, the desperation. My heart twisted, but I refused to let myself give in. Not this time. "I can't do it anymore, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "I've been carrying everyone for so long, and I don't have anything left to give." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It felt like time had stopped. I braced myself for the backlash, the disappointment, the guilt that would flood me in waves. But instead, my mom's voice came through, cracked and vulnerable. "Do you think I wanted this for you? Do you think I wanted to put you in this position?" Her words hit me harder than I expected, because for the first time, I realized she wasn't just asking me to help Natalie for her own sake. She was asking because she felt like she had no other choice. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the weight of the years of sacrifices she had made for our family. "I don't know, Mom," I whispered. "I don't know if I can be what you want me to be anymore." There was a long, heavy silence. I could feel her trying to find the words, but there were none that would fix this. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always known you were strong, Claire, but I didn't know you'd stop being my daughter." The words cut deeper than I expected, like a sharp knife carving through my chest. I knew she didn't mean it the way it sounded, but the implication was there. I was letting her down. I was walking away from everything I had been raised to believe was my responsibility. "I'm still your daughter, Mom," I said quietly. "But I have to be me first. I've spent my whole life being who you wanted me to be. I can't keep doing that." There was another long silence before she finally responded, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know how to help you, Claire, but I hope someday you'll understand why we needed you." "I understand more than you think," I replied, my throat tightening. She sighed. "I know you do, but that doesn't make it any easier. I just don't know if I can forgive you." I felt a knot form in my stomach. Maybe forgiveness isn't what I need right now. Maybe I need to live for myself. I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't know if I'd made the right decision. I didn't know if I'd ever hear from her again. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to fix this rift that seemed to have opened between us. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to take back what I had said. I couldn't. Not now. It was days before I heard from anyone in my family again. The silence was deafening, and the absence of their presence in my life felt both like relief and a slow, creeping dread. I went through the motions of my daily routine, but something had changed. The bond that had always held me to my family felt thinner now, fragile. I found myself thinking more and more about what my life could be if I kept going down this path. If I really broke free from the weight of their expectations, if I lived for me. But then Natalie called. Her voice was low, almost hesitant. "Claire," she began, sounding tired, defeated, "I don't know if I can do this anymore. I need you." Her words hit me differently than before. This wasn't about money or fixing her problems. This was about her needing me. For the first time, I heard vulnerability in her voice, something I hadn't heard in years. "I don't know if I can keep helping you, Natalie," I said, my voice wavering just slightly. "I've given so much of myself to this family, and I'm running on empty. Please, Claire, you're the only one who's always been there for me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do without you." Her words echoed in my mind, stirring something deep inside me. The guilt, the need to help her, it all came rushing back. But I couldn't ignore what I had learned. I couldn't ignore the fact that I had always been the one to step in, the one to save everyone, while no one had ever really looked at me. "I need to live my own life, Natalie," I said, more firmly this time. "I can't keep sacrificing myself for you. I need to live for me now." There was a long pause, and then, finally, her voice broke. "I understand, Claire, I understand." I hung up the phone, and for the first time, I felt the weight lift. It wasn't about cutting off my family. It was about breaking free from the cycle of sacrifice. I had made my choice. I had finally chosen myself. A week passed. No calls, no messages, just silence. The quiet I had longed for felt more like a hollow emptiness now. I kept telling myself I had made the right decision. I had chosen me, and that had to be enough. But the silence, the absence of their voices, gnawed at me. The weight of the distance between us was heavier than I thought it would be. The first few days, I stayed busy. I focused on work, went for long walks in the evening, tried to distract myself with small tasks around the apartment. But the silence never stopped. It was there when I woke up, when I went to bed. I began to feel the isolation creeping in, not the kind of loneliness that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes when you realize you've chosen a path that might leave you isolated forever. I wondered if I had done the right thing. Had I been selfish? Was I wrong for choosing to live my life and not constantly be the one who bylaid everyone out? I thought back to my mom's words, "You'll be turning your back on your family." The guilt lingered, but somewhere deep inside, I knew that the life I had been living wasn't sustainable. I had been running on empty for so long, always putting everyone else's needs before my own, never asking for anything, never expecting anything in return. And it had taken a toll on me. I had learned to bury my needs, to ignore my own desires, but I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that I was fine when I was. The loneliness started to sink in more after a few days. I would sit in my apartment at night, staring out the window, watching the city buzz with life, and wonder if anyone else felt as lost as I did. I had pushed so many people away, my family, my friends, even my own needs, just to survive. But surviving wasn't enough anymore. I wanted to feel alive. I wanted to live. Then, one night, the phone rang. My heart skipped a beat. For a second, I thought it might be someone from my family. But when I looked at the screen, I saw it was my friend from work, Tina. "Hey, Claire, how's it going?" she asked, her voice bright and cheerful. I hesitated for a moment. I hadn't been social lately. I hadn't really talked to anyone outside of work. But something in her voice made me want to respond, to reconnect, even if just for a moment. "I'm okay, Tina," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "Just getting through things." "I get it," she replied. "Hey, listen, we're all going out for drinks after work tomorrow. You should join us. It'll be good to get out of your head for a bit." I thought about it for a second. I hadn't been out in a long time. The idea of being around people, of not being alone in my thoughts, felt both terrifying and freeing. "I'll think about it," I said, not quite ready to commit. "Come on, Claire," she urged. "You've been cooped up in that apartment for days. You deserve to have some fun, just come for an hour. It'll do you good." I sighed, feeling a mix of hesitation and relief. Maybe it was time to start living again. To take small steps towards reclaiming the life I had put on hold for so long. "Okay," I said finally, a smile creeping onto my face. "I'll come." The next night, I found myself in a small bar downtown, surrounded by people laughing, chatting, and enjoying the evening. The energy in the room felt foreign to me. It had been so long since I had let myself feel this. I was standing at the bar, nursing a drink, when Tina walked up to me with a grin. "There you are," she exclaimed. "See, I told you it'd be good to get out for a while." I gave a small laugh, feeling a wave of nervousness in my chest. It was strange, being around people again. I hadn't realized how much I'd closed myself off. I didn't realize how much I needed this, I admitted, glancing around at the crowd. "I've been stuck, I think, in my own head." "You're not alone in that," Tina said with a knowing look. "I think we all get stuck sometimes. But hey, you're here now, that's progress." The words hit me harder than I expected. It felt like a weight had been lifted, just by being present, by reconnecting with the world around me. I had spent so long trying to keep everything together, trying to control the narrative of my own life, that I had forgotten what it felt like to just be. To exist in the moment. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to laugh, to feel like I was part of something. It wasn't a perfect moment. It wasn't a moment of epiphany, but it was enough. I stayed for a few hours, chatting with Tina and a couple of her friends, getting to know them better. It wasn't anything life-changing, but it was a step forward. A step toward remembering who I was outside of my family's expectations. A step toward reclaiming parts of myself that had been buried for too long. As I left the bar that night, the cool air hitting my face, I felt a small but significant shift inside me. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't healed. But I was learning to live again. I wasn't sure what the future would hold. I didn't know if my family would ever forgive me for choosing myself. I didn't know if I would ever be able to rebuild those relationships. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on the right path. A week passed. No calls, no messages, just silence. The quiet I had longed for felt more like a hollow emptiness now. I kept telling myself I had made the right decision. I had chosen me, and that had to be enough. But the silence, the absence of their voices, gnawed at me. The weight of the distance between us was heavier than I thought it would be. The first few days, I stayed busy. I focused on work, went for long walks in the evening, tried to distract myself with small tasks around the apartment. But the silence never stopped. It was there when I woke up, when I went to bed. I began to feel the isolation creeping in. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes when you realize you've chosen a path that might leave you isolated forever. I wondered if I had done the right thing. Had I been selfish? Was I wrong for choosing to live my life and not constantly be the one who bylaid everyone out? I thought back to my mom's words, "You'll be turning your back on your family." The guilt lingered, but somewhere deep inside, I knew that the life I had been living wasn't sustainable. I had been running on empty for so long, always putting everyone else's needs before my own, never asking for anything, never expecting anything in return. And it had taken a toll on me. I had learned to bury my needs, to ignore my own desires, but I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that I was fine when I was. The loneliness started to sink in more after a few days. I would sit in my apartment at night, staring out the window, watching the city buzz with life, and wonder if anyone else felt as lost as I did. I had pushed so many people away, my family, my friends, even my own needs, just to survive. But surviving wasn't enough anymore. I wanted to feel alive. I wanted to live. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads, faced with the choice of living for yourself or living for others? It's never easy to put yourself first, especially when your family and loved ones have come to rely on you in ways that feel unbreakable. But sometimes, saying no isn't about rejecting the people you love. It's about learning to love yourself again. If you've ever had to make a tough decision to prioritize your own needs, what did that moment look like for you? Was it a freeing experience, or did you feel guilty? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Feel free to share them in the comments below. Remember, you're not alone in navigating these tough moments. And if you're still trying to figure it all out, you're in good company. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of growth, strength, and personal discovery. The next night, I found myself in a small bar downtown, surrounded by people laughing, chatting, and enjoying the evening. The energy in the room felt foreign to me. It had been so long since I had let myself feel this. I was standing at the bar, nursing a drink, when Tina walked up to me with a grin. "There you are," she exclaimed. "See, I told you it'd be good to get out for a while." I gave a small laugh, feeling a wave of nervousness in my chest. It was strange, being around people again. I hadn't realized how much I'd closed myself off. I didn't realize how much I needed this, I admitted, glancing around at the crowd. I've been stuck, I think, in my own head. You're not alone.